All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the State of Blackness. I'm so excited to have you here tonight during this event. My name is Javon Edwards. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm an admissions officer at Cal Poly and a graduate student in the HEXA program. This academic term, I have had the privilege of supporting the Black Academic Excellence Center, and I'm thrilled to be co moderating this event with my colleague Leilani.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Leilani Hemmings-Pale, and my pronouns are they, them, theirs. I am a class of 2020 alumni from the Comparative Ethnic Studies Department here at Cal Poly, and I'm serving as the 2020 to 2021 AmeriCorps Volunteer Infrastructure and Practicum Fellow for the Black Academic Excellence Center, and it's my honor to give the land acknowledgement tonight. We acknowledge and make visible that the land on which we gather carries the lives and lifeways of the indigenous peoples of San Luis Obispo County, the Yaktitu Titu Yaktil Northern Chumash tribe. We honor and respect the indigenous people's connections to their ancestral homelands. For all descendants of the African diaspora living in what is currently America, the ongoing project of colonization and its trappings of conquest and slavery are a familiar one. This circumstance is one that brings our Black and Indigenous communities together in survivance, what Anishinaabe critic and scholar Gerald Visner names as an active sense of presence, the continuance of Native stories, not a mere reaction or a survivable name. Native survivance stories are renunciations of dominance, tragedy, and victimry, end quote. We affirm our enduring existence, resistance, and kinship with the indigenous peoples of this and all other lands. And so, as we live and learn here on this territory, we must remain perpetually committed to the work of decolonization, which necessitates going beyond statements of recognition. Acknowledgement by itself is a small gesture and becomes meaningful when coupled with authentic and ongoing relationships that propel us toward taking informed actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Leilani, for that beautiful land acknowledgement. And now I would like to introduce Dr. Jamie Patton, Assistant Vice President for Student Affairs, Diversity, and Inclusion, to kick us off.
All right. Welcome. Thank you, everyone who has joined us tonight for our annual State of Blackness event. One of my favorite traditions and one of my favorite programs that we host here at Cal Poly, where we always have candid conversations that lead to continual change here at Cal Poly. As mentioned, my name is Dr. Jamie Patton. I use he, him pronouns and serve as Assistant Vice President for Student Affairs here at Cal Poly. I'd like to thank the Black Academic Excellence Center for hosting this forum to discuss the state of Blackness. I would also like to thank the panelists, our BSU President, Zane Ellis Rector, Dr. Joni Roberts, Dr. Ethne Stewart, who is also an alum, Cam Clay, who's an alum, and BSU for their willingness to share their experience. When I heard the title and or the theme of State of Blackness this year, I kind of perked up because it's called Unfinished Business. That was the title of the book of one of my all-time favorite movies, The Best Man, that aired back in 1999. And it was the title of the book that was central to a story based on Black relationships that carry well beyond the college experience. So I was like, oh, this is sexy. I believe we continue to move forward in advancing our institution's climate around Black and other BIPOC and underrepresented populations, but there remains unfinished business here at Cal Poly. We must continue to shift our campus climate to provide a welcoming space for Black and other underrepresented groups. We must, and we're making progress, but we must continue to recruit and retain the brilliant faculty, Black faculty and staff, not just for our Black students, but for the entire community. We aspire to educate the population and or the same demographic of the population of California. And with that, we need to be able to provide diverse experiences and Black voices to our faculty that teach and to our staff that interact with our students daily. We must continue to make strides in getting Black students to commit and attending Cal Poly. We must continue to close the equity gaps around academic achievement for our Black students. And we must continue to identify space or multiple spaces to elevate the work of the Black Academic Excellence Center. We've made some progress, I would say, over the last 15 years, but as we see and as we know, there's a lot of work and unfinished business that we need to continue to make happen. I look forward to tonight's discussion. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you to Jamie for those welcoming words. So as he mentioned, State of Blackness has historically been a panel discussion that is a call to action to enhance and support initiatives concerning the Black community here at Cal Poly and San Luis Obispo and beyond. Our overarching theme for this event is, as Jamie said, unfinished business, as an ode to the ways that this particular moment we are facing locally, nationally, and internationally is simultaneously out of the ordinary, to put it mildly, but also just exacerbating the conditions we have been living under and fighting against for time immemorial. State of Blackness 2021 will examine the ways that COVID-19, the ongoing racial uprisings, the experiences we have at Cal Poly and the lingering effects they have on us during and after our time here, and all the other facets of our experiences of Blackness inform the lives we lead. Additionally, we seek to hold space for the ways that we are continually finding joy, generative energy, community, and healing amidst these otherwise intolerable circumstances that are wrapped up in our lived experiences as Black people.
Thank you, Lonnie, for providing additional context to the purpose of the State of Blackness. Tonight, we will begin with a facilitated discussion moderated by Lonnie, and we will close the discussion with an audience Q&A. Please feel free to utilize the chat feature to affirm or validate the panelist statements or ask any questions that you have for the panelists. If you do have specific questions for a particular panelist, please add their name along with your question in the chat. Great. Now, our incredible panelists have been asked to introduce themselves and to share some photos and or a song lyric that represents their identities and experience. So please give a warm welcome to our first panelist, Dr. Joni Roberts.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me and having me on the panel. So the quotes that I chose are from Bob Marley's Redemption Song. And the reason I chose these quotes is because it speaks to the essence of who I am as an Afro-Caribbean woman. I was born and raised on the beautiful island of Jamaica. And so I'm a little biased to other Caribbean islands. But nonetheless, I grew up listening to Bob Marley, and this song, for many of you who know that for us in the Caribbean, looking at the US and looking at slavery, it was a surreal experience for us because we had the privilege of living in a country where we were the majority, right? There wasn't the oppression we had overcome. And so like we had the eras of Marcus Garvey and Bob and like everyone else who was like trying to work with other countries to be at a place where we were. And this song, Redemption Song, like emancipate yourself from mental slavery, gets me every single time. Last year in 2020, when I saw what was going on, this is the song that came to mind. When I saw Kamala Harris when VP, this is the song that came to mind, right? Like every time I look and I see a Black body die in the street at the hands of police brutality, I think about this song, right? Like, how long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? And so this really represents who I am and what I bring here tonight. And I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Roberts. And we are now going to move on to our next panelist, Ethne Stewart.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ethne Stewart, she, her, hers. I am the director for TRIO Achievers, or Student Support Services here on campus. It is a retention program that's federally funded and work with a very diverse group of population of students from all different majors and all different backgrounds. So I included photos, one which was from our paint night last year. about this time last year, actually, which is amazing, which we definitely try to encourage activities and events, cultural events, activities that students may or may not have an opportunity to engage with. And then the running joke is I was a cafes student before it was called cafes. So love plants. So I have a picture of myself with a running joke with our friends down at my other position at UCSB. We were watering. Everyone took a turn to water this one plant to keep it kind of alive. So it was like a community kind of building. And then most recently, before the pandemic happened, we went to New York and got to visit the High Line, so which was awesome, and got to see the statues by Simone Lee. A picture of my sister, my mom, and I when my sister was living in New York in front of the amazing art that was taking place, which kind of aligns with Black History Month. So thank you.
Thank you, Ethne.
Hello, my name is Zane Ellis Rector. I'm a current 5th-year architecture student at Cal Poly. My pronouns are he, him, his. I am from Oakland, California, and also, excuse me, I know also the current BSU president of internal affairs. So I chose a song lyric to kind of, represent me or show what's up. And this is a recent song from Eric the Architect, one of 3 members of the Flatbush Zombies, who are my favorite musical group. Have their roots in Flatbush, Brooklyn, and this is just one of his solo projects. So it goes, I can't lose, I get too invested in it. How could this be love if there's no obsession in it? I think it's very self-explanatory, but just to, I suppose, elaborate. How can one lose when they give their all into it, no matter the outcome, or when you're always giving 100%, or when you are really just going for it? There can be no other outcome than like a win in my eyes, whether others may perceive it as a loss. You're always going to gain some experience, gain some insight from whatever it is you're doing. And then how could this be love if there's no obsession in it? There's so many things in life that are challenging, or take a lot of it out of you, but end of the day, we're doing those things for a reason. And I'd like to think that we love what we're doing. And I think it's really powerful to say that you love something so much that you are obsessed with it. And I think that's in self-reflection, that's probably what's gotten me to this point, still being here at Cal Poly, when so many of my classmates, friends, peers have gone to other schools or left due because like certain hardships, academically, socially, whatever it may be. But end of the day, I found something I loved here, found a reason to be here, a reason to stick it out, and so there's got to be love there. So I think that lends itself to a little bit about me, but also kind of where I'm coming from as a panelist here. So I appreciate y'all for having me, and I hope I can provide some insights.
Thank you, Zane. Last but not least, please welcome our final panelist, Cameron Clay.
What's going on, everyone? Cam Clay. I graduated Cal Poly in 2018 with a comparative ethnic studies degree. Shout out to the ethnic studies department. I'm sure they're well represented on this call. I made a mistake. I didn't know I could have had more than one photo. I only have one here, but it's all good. To piggyback off of what Zane was speaking to, like having a reason to be here. In the back, or you see there's like a group photo there. In the middle is Dolores Huerta. This was an event where she came to Cal Poly to speak some years ago. It was 2018, I believe. Yeah, because I had my locks in this picture. But this was like the reason I stayed at Cal Poly. That was like my reason for being at Cal Poly. It was like, not all people are represented in this picture, but like the relationships with the people that are in this photo. And I was going through my photos, like trying to look, and I was like, oh, I'm missing some. I need to hit up some of my folks that I graduated with, because I know they have more pictures and stuff like that. That's why this photo is there. Currently, I work for a nonprofit based out of Oakland, California, but we're a national program. We focus on getting more underrepresented minorities into STEM careers and STEM universities and colleges throughout the nation. I've been there. I work on the curriculum team there. I write curriculum. And the reason why I chose this lyric from Solange, I think that it spoke to a lot of my experience at Cal Poly, maybe not even necessarily mine. I think this song is really about like Blackness and what it can be like with the weight that sometimes you may feel throughout your life and trying to figure out ways on how to navigate that weight and carry that weight. And I reflect on a lot of the conversations that I had with other Black students and Indigenous students when I was at Cal Poly, and oftentimes the conversation was around figuring out ways to navigate Cal Poly and stay sane and be successful there, and in ways in which aren't necessarily spoken about often at Cal Poly in the open. So I think that events like this are great. And I want to thank all the folks for putting this together. And I'm glad I could make it. I guess that's a plus of the COVID Zoom world because I'm coming live from Brooklyn. So yeah, thanks for having me here.
Thank you, Cam, and thank you, panelists, for introducing yourselves, sharing your photos and song lyrics with us. We are truly honored to have you be a part of the panel this evening. So now we are going to jump into our facilitated questions. Each panelist will have the opportunity to respond to each prompt, and we would like the panelists to feel free to take the discussion in whichever route they feel based on the questions and responses provided. I will be monitoring the chat and may extend follow-up questions that the panelists may respond to if they feel compelled to do so. And with that, I would like to let Leilani begin the discussion with the first question.
Okay, so let's just dive right into it. So our first question is, how do your current positions relative to Cal Poly and San Luis Obispo inform your view of what the state of Blackness is in 2021?
Can I talk too? Oh, okay. Hey, yo. So I'll get it started. I think my role is really when we've really, in 2019, we've transitioned a lot of the work to really elevate our BIPOC students and thinking about how do we be in better coalition with the students to provide the services, the amenities, and the best Cal Poly experience that we can that many of our students get. So I'm fortunate to be in the position where I get a chance to work more directly with the Black Academic Excellence Center. And in that work, we've collaborated with marketing, we've collaborated with admissions, we collaborated with some of the academic colleges to say, okay, boom, how can we best serve our students to close the equity gaps? But in that, as well, it's layered because again, when I think about the history of Cal Poly and I think about the work that needs to happen, it's going to take time. But in that time and in that same vein, and I'll close with this, I think since 2018, since our last, I would say, large public diversity flashpoint with regard to Blackface, I think we've made strides with building bridges with the Black community, the Black student community. I believe that we continue to hear and listen to the voices of our Black students. And I think we continue to move forward.
So I can go next. I'd say as a faculty member who's faculty in the Department of Kinesiology and Public Health, like public health is my background. And so it aligns really well professionally for me when I think about marginalized communities and making sure that things are equitable and just. However, within my department, I have yet to find a Black student. And I've been here since 2019. So I'm still looking for them. So if y'all trying to switch, let me know. But what I will say is that like I get excited when I see people of color, especially people who look like me on the Central Coast, right? So I literally go to the supermarket and count people. I'm like, oh, it's a barbecue because I see 5 people, right? I'm like, oh, we out here today. So when I think about, hold on, so I'm hearing the echo. So if somebody can mute themselves, that'd be great. But so when I think about like the state of Blackness here on the Central Coast and at Cal Poly, because I knew coming in of the lack of diversity here, right? So it's part of the reason I came. But I think as I interact with my Black students outside of my department, and I look at the things we take for granted, even for students of color within my department, it's clear to me that like we need to do more. And so as the only Black female in my department, because I'm not counting you, Camille, you're not over here anymore, that it's my responsibility to make sure that I'm representing well, right? Not only for those who look like me, but also those who are also women and other women of color. So that's currently where my position lands with that.
And I'm sorry, if I can add one more thing. I think one of the things that have changed and advanced it in the last 2 years is just the coalition between the BFSA. When I think about the Dr. Camille O'Briens, when I think about the other faculty members like Dr. Denise Isom and bringing their experiences over the last decade, when I think about the experiences of Ethnic Stewart, Dr. Stewart and her family here at Cal Poly, and as we listen to those, how can we advance our work? And that's definitely been a part of the shift that we've been able to make, is empowering and listening to some of the voices that have been here in addition to our students. So I'd be remiss, I'm sorry if I didn't mention, again, listening to the elders and those who have been here much longer than some of the recent faculty and staff.
And I would add on to what Jamie mentioned. I think the relationship definitely between, for instance, Black faculty and staff has become more prominent. And as we try and expand and refine and try and recruit more, obviously, Black faculty and staff to the campus. I'm definitely with Dr. Roberts. I'm the only person in my whole unit for miles, possibly the only person in our whole building. So it's been, it's definitely a different experience. I did grow up here, so I have a different perspective in terms of I kind of grew up in a lack of cultural diverseness, but have tried to find and shape my community with great people around me. So just having to kind of build the community around you and reaching out and making that community. Definitely, even as I moved to other campuses and have worked at 2 other campuses, where diversity was a little bit more pronounced. It's even within that, usually the Black population is a smaller population. So definitely have found champions across, not just obviously within the Black community, but definitely people outside of the Black community that have really supported and guided my ability to be successful. And then, as Dr. Patton mentioned, I had 2 great parents, and both of them are alums. And so they definitely have had that Cal Poly experience. I think at their time, when they were at Cal Poly, there were actually more Africans than there were African Americans. And obviously, I think the numbers have trailed off. But I definitely remember early 90s, just before Prop 209, there was a huge and great population. Specifically, my mom was assigned to College of Architecture. So there was a huge population of Black students in architecture and used to always come over and hang out. So having them as extended family and having those experiences really helped to shape some of my youth leaving into actually moving to Cal Poly as a student.
Yeah, and I can maybe give like a bit of perspective from that, current student, I suppose, view. And it's been really interesting, the kind of trajectory and the timeline of the journey from, growing up in the Bay Area, predominantly like Oakland, Berkeley, Richmond areas, and going to school in Berkeley for that most of that time. You're always very aware of your Blackness, sure, but it's never incredibly perceptible where it's like you're aware of it every single day in terms of relation to other people, because you're just one of, like, kind of many other Black people, like you're around. Whereas coming to Cal Poly, to San Luis Obispo, it was so, you become hyper aware almost. Like, I feel like many people are already hyper aware when one just has that identity just carried with them. I think I can relate to that, but it becomes just like augmented to such a degree when you're, then that's like the sample size of your existence is then just put on like a microscope, where then you don't know if you are one of few or maybe the only like Black or person of color identifying individual that a classmate or someone you run into has like interacted with maybe that day or even like ever, so it's very, and then you become almost even more aware of kind of how you carry yourself, how you're being perceived because of that. I don't even want to call it pressure to like appear a certain way, because at the end of the day, I personally don't mind how other people see me. Like, I just am gonna always be who I am and do what I do. But I think early in my life, and definitely first coming here 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago, I definitely felt kind of overwhelmed that I was seeing so few faces that look like mine. And then more specifically in architecture, for my year specifically, I'm one of, if I'm not mistaken, one of 4 Black people in my class. I'm the only Black man in my class, and so that itself is just very interesting. I guess not something I've ever like kind of had to deal with, and it's had its its struggles, and you get through it. And I don't want to like make it seem like it's taken away from my experience. It's just made the experience different, and you learn from it. And like I said with that song quote, if I didn't love my schooling, if I didn't like love my classmates, if I didn't love the education I was getting, I would have left. That's always an option. And it's always been, I've always had support around me that said, whatever you got to do, however you're feeling, we got your back and we'll support you with that. And I've said, I'm gonna get through this. Like, I'm here, I like it, and I see myself moving forward doing this. And just to kind of cap it off, with my current position as one of BSU's presidents, it's interesting shifting into a role of now looking kind of more outward and understanding other people's grievances and other people's experiences, so I can then hopefully create a safer space, create just space in general, just here, and then hopefully come up with ways of rectifying those issues, and it's hard. It's really hard, and especially with COVID being all on Zoom, it's hard to communicate, and it can be easy to kind of cordon oneself off. And so it's really just like striking that balance, and we're all learning. And I just like end it off with, I would not give up my Blackness and the Black experience for anything. I think it's gonna be a theme that this stems from myself, and I'm sure it's gonna be a theme for others as well. So.
Well, I was waiting because I wanted to hear Zane's perspective, since you are a student there. I could relate more to the student experience there than being a faculty member there. And so I was just interested in that. But I have a few things. I think that I was a non-traditional student. I was a transfer student to Cal Poly, and I was also a non-traditional student. When I graduated high school, I actually went to school in Atlanta, Georgia. I went to Morehouse College, which is an HBCU. If anyone on the line isn't familiar, that's pretty much, if you see a white student at Morehouse, there's probably max 3. When I was there was 3. So it's the complete opposite of SLO. Yeah. And when I decided to go to Cal Poly, I understood what it was going to be and I knew what it was. I understood the demographics and I was a little bit older. So I think I was able to fare a little bit better. I'm also from the Bay Area, like Zane. I grew up in the South Bay and the East Bay, and diverse. I mean, there's all kinds of different people in the Bay Area. So that's what I was accustomed to, but I also had experience moving in predominantly white spaces for high school. I went to a predominantly white high school and was one of the few Black students there. So I kind of got a taste for that. And I think that kind of prepared me along with the years that I had before I moved to SLO. So I think that really informs the way I lived in SLO. And I think relationally now, I think the question is about like, how do we relate to SLO now, or SLO as a city and Cal Poly as a city? I would say that's an interesting question, and I think that's why Lonnie asked me to come speak today. Yeah, so I was hearing about SLO in the news last year with a lot of the things going on. A lot of what was going on wasn't necessarily a surprise to me at all, that's for sure. And then about last year, I was at work and I had just hired some folks to be some of our seasonal staff. We have like a college navigation program for students of color. Like we have basically guidance counselors that help them through the process. And one of them had went to UC Santa Cruz and the other one went to UC Santa Barbara. And both of them, when they found out that I went to Cal Poly, the first thing that they said to me was, "Oh, wow, that blackface, like it's really racist there. It's crazy there, isn't it?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I was there for all of that. I experienced that." And so I thought that was interesting. Like that's how SLO like popped up again, even all those years after I had been gone. And interestingly enough, so the program that I work for, we focus on getting BIPOC students into STEM careers and STEM majors and at different universities throughout the country. And we have students from Detroit, Atlanta, Oakland, East Palo Alto, LA, Philadelphia, Chicago, a lot of predominantly Black areas. And our program serves mainly Black, Latinx, and Indigenous students. And inevitably, I will see students on their progress reports or their college interest list say they want to go to Cal Poly. And I'm always like, ooh, do you really though? Right. And I think that's some of the things that I heard that Dr. Patton mentioned about some of the programming that has been popping up in the last few years. I would love to learn more about that because I can't necessarily speak to that. But when I see those students, those young people of color from predominantly Black and brown neighborhood spaces say that they want to go to Cal Poly, I'm always a little iffy on encouraging them to do that because I cannot say that their experience will be one of support. And there's other universities that are on their list that I can say, oh yeah, I mean, you'll probably be cool there. But for Cal Poly, I'm always a little bit hesitant to necessarily encourage that. I don't discourage that because I wouldn't want to, kill a young person's dreams or anything like that. But I'm always very, taken aback by that. And I think the way the news cycle works these days, it's, things come and go out the news. Maybe a few years ago, folks were more hip to some of the environment that SLO was when I was living there. Not sure if it's completely changed in 2 years. I doubt it. But so that's, I do struggle when it comes to SLO and Cal Poly. And, if personally, if it was anyone in my family, my younger cousins, my little brother saying, "Oh, I would be like, no, you're not going there." So yeah.
All right, thank you for your candid words, everyone. I think we're very much already really getting into the ways that our experiences here in SLO and even beyond that are so complex and have so much nuance to them, and things that we're navigating. So I think this is a perfect segue into our next question, which is the moment we find ourselves in with COVID-19, the ongoing racial uprisings, a climate crisis, and insurrection at the nation's capital, to name a few, are circumstances that in some ways feel unprecedented. In other ways, this moment is a culmination of at least 500 years of anti-Black and racist systems of oppression. How do we navigate naming the uniqueness of this time while also recognizing the ways that Black folks and our kindred communities have been in the struggle against these systems far beyond this moment? And why is that important? Joni, would you like to start?
Well, if you're gonna call me out, sure. So as I was reflecting on the question, I really thought about last year when things really started to kick off, right? And in my classes, my very white classes, where my students had the audacity to ask me why I wasn't talking about the issues going on. And I had to pause for a second because I was like, oh, I need a moment to respond. And it struck me that while I don't think the intent of their questions was like, you Black lady, why aren't you talking about this? But the conversations were occurring on campus about everything. And so it was odd then for them to be in my class and I was silent. And I was silent intentionally. I was silent because I was processing my own things. I have a sister who's a healthcare worker, and so she was on the front line working. So I was dealing with that, the exposure to my extended family and etc. And then I thought about family members, right? Like all the males in my family. I was like, oh, could be my cousin on the street with somebody's knee on their neck. And I was like, oh, I need a moment, Jesus. So I showed up to work and I did my job. And my job did not include taking care of your emotional health. And my apologies in advance if I offend anyone in my statements, but that's not what I get paid to do. So I did my job. And it was surprising to me to hear that I didn't go above and beyond my job to do, to take care of my students' needs or their emotional desires. And while I did not address it in class, I did at the end sent a nice little memo to my students, letting them know that the request that they were requesting of me to peel back an additional layer than all the layers I show up with every day, they fail to consider. They fail to consider what I may be experiencing in that moment and how I needed time to process my own stuff, much less take care of them. So as I think about the uniqueness of this time, it's unique in many ways, right? We're in the middle of a pandemic, and the pandemic highlighted a lot of the things that, yes, has been occurring for many years. And what I love about the pandemic is it brought people's attention full screen, right? Because I believe that if we weren't in the middle of a pandemic, I don't know that folks would have showed up and marched, like folks who don't look like me. I don't know. I mean, I hope they would have. I don't know that they would have. But there's something about being in a space where you couldn't go anywhere. Your attention was only on one thing. And so you were like, oh, we should do something. And I'm like, yeah, we should have done something like a few months ago, a few months before that, last year, the year before that. I mean, we could continue, right? And let's not talk about the fact that like we were all like paying attention to George Floyd, but did we forget about all the other names before George, right? Especially our Black and brown girls, right? Like there's data that shows that we tend to remember the boys and the men, and we leave out the girls. And so I think what was going on is unique, yes, being in this pandemic space, but I'm grateful for the pandemic space because I think it really highlighted a lot of things that needed to be highlighted. I'm happy for all the folks who went out. I told my students I wasn't gonna go out because I knew that my Black body just being present guaranteed my risk of being arrested. And so I wasn't trying to be on the news. That sounds horrible, but that's the reality I live in. So I was grateful for everyone else who went out, but I needed to sit my behind at home because the likelihood of me getting arrested at home was low. And so that's real, because when we look at the arrest of folks who got arrested in slow, just saying. So yeah, I'm a pause there. Somebody else could grab the baton.
Yeah, I can hop on. I think the question kind of addresses it, but in terms of, it states the uniqueness of the situation, which I think it certainly is. But also, as Dr. Joni Roberts, stated, this isn't new at all. It's not new to our generation. It's not new to generations before us, and it's not new to generations before them. However, the moment we find ourselves in, for at least my generation, I think this is that first kind of big, like, oh, the things that people have been talking about forever, it really is here, like right there, and it's very apparent. And I've talked to my mom about this a lot, friends, and just, it can be cathartic for sure to, speak with people that are like-minded with you and all that. And I think that's the beauty I find with talking to my mom about a lot of these things. She just brings a perspective that is so much more nuanced than I think I have, just because she's a Black woman, a queer Black woman who's, older than I am, has lived through more than I have. And so she can shed light on so many things that I am far too naive to understand or even may fail to consider. And I also feel so privileged to then have that resource available to me to shed light on things that, either I'm too unaware to even realize, or if I'm too scared to confront. But when I do it, it then awakens me to so much more, right? And I think in relation to the pandemic, the protests, the election that we had, it all was certainly hyper, I think Dr. Roberts also said this, but that, I feel like a lot of the feelings about all of these big moments would be far lessened if people could go out and have a drink on a Friday night. It sounds, pessimistic or, whatever, but I think that's just real. That is a very pragmatist, that's just the way it is. But in the same vein, I am appreciative of the moment. And while this all sucks and I wouldn't wish this again, even though it probably will happen again, and we have to prepare for that, whatever, that's one other conversation. It does have its silver lining, I suppose, in that it allows, Cam to be here from Brooklyn to talk about these things. It allows it to just even want to be discussed and for people to feel actually invested in talking about it. But I think we all have to be hypercritical. And that's, I think, hypercritical of ourselves. Sorry, I didn't finish that. That there's always something that we can do better. And I think that for me, and to a far greater extent, so I think there's a question that'll be later that's like, what can everyone do or whatever. It's asked a lot, like, what can I do? And so it varies, and I'm not gonna answer that question now, but that depending on your experience and all of that, what you can do, it's gonna be different. Like my mom, Dr. Roberts, they're not gonna go out and protest because they're protesting just by living their lives every day, doing what they gotta do to live. That's their protest. Why? They don't need to be doing all that. Whereas the people that can and have a greater degree, they're gonna engage differently and assist in different ways. And so, it really just comes down to looking inward and being like, asking those hard questions as like, what is it that I'm doing right? What is it I can do more? And, that might seem convoluted, and I don't have the answers. I'm asking myself that all the time, but it's a continual progression, and I'm hopeful. And I've had many friends have talked us about that. There's always been uproar when something tragic happens to a member of the Black community, always, whether it's small or big uproar. But I've never seen an uproar to this extent, and that does give me a glimmer of hope, right? I'm still going to keep it real and be like, well, is it just for appearances? Is it just for the moment? But the fact that it's gone to this degree, it does keep me hopeful. I'm just hoping that momentum can continue, and that these discussions can continue. Because there's we've really only scratched the surface. The iceberg there's a ton on the top, far deeper on the bottom. We're still on the top of the iceberg. We have not even cracked the surface yet. So there is an unfathomable amount to do. So yeah, I just gotta keep thinking.
Absolutely. Cam, did you want to say something?
Yeah. So first thing I would say is, being able to even recognize that Black folks and Indigenous folks and our communities have been struggling against these systems beyond this moment requires that you know your history and know history, right? Whether you're Black, white, Native, Asian, however you want to identify, it's about history, right? Because right now it's still February, it's Black History Month, but like it's everyone's history, right? Everyone has contributed to the world in which we are now in different ways and at different levels. And without knowing that history, then you can't even begin to understand how this is unique. Zane spoke to being able to like tap into his mother and ask her about her experience and some of those things. And not everyone has those living folks, to be able to do that. But there's books, there's ethnic studies classes. The bill just got passed. Ethnic studies has a bunch of new classes opening up at Cal Poly. I would hop on to those. I would ask the provost, if you're a student there now, to get more classes, get more faculty members there to teach those classes, have them cross-registered. I'm sure Dr. Roberts could speak to public health as it relates to ethnic studies, right? Because these ethnic studies doesn't sit in its own silo. It's a corrective history that taps into various fields so that you understand the history of the field that you are in, whether that's engineering, whether that's biology, whatever it may be. So I think knowing history is important. And that also will, if you are trying to get engaged, you can learn from the mistakes of folks in the past and not make those mistakes, or the winnings of folks in the past, and understand how those things were applied. I think it's unique for the very fact that we've never seen, at least in my knowledge, global support against systems of oppression that Black folks face in this country and in the world, right? When I saw what was going on with George Floyd last year, and I saw folks in Syria, like doing murals with George Floyd in the rubble of their cities, right? Like there is a global understanding now in a way in which I'm not sure that folks would have seen if it weren't for the pandemic, as some folks have mentioned before, right? People are sitting at home and have to watch and see what's going on. There's nothing else on. Sports weren't on. And you notice, even though all the professionals are saying that the pandemic is in a worse place than it was this time last year, things are opening back up. I would be hard pressed to deny that that's not strategic, in the sense that you don't want people to, again, be out protesting, be out demanding change, having to pay attention. It's easier if folks can just go back to shopping. And we also see what's unique about this situation is now companies feel compelled to give money. You see large corporations saying they're going to give millions of dollars to these funds. I couldn't even name them all, right? And I'm sure that money might be going to good use, but you never know. I see positionings opening up at companies. People are hiring. They want diversity coaches and they want this, that, and the third. So I think that we're seeing folks have a money is being put behind some of these the words. Maybe, possibly, it's hard to say without being at every single one. And I think the other thing that we're seeing is that's unique to this era, social media. I mean, I think that really the in the wake of Ferguson, we saw social media being used by young Black folks in Ferguson, coordinating with young Palestinians and learning how to defend themselves against military tactics that the police in Ferguson were using against American citizens. And they were on Twitter, and Palestinian youth were like, oh, this is how you defend yourself against tear gas. This is how you wash it out your eyes, right? And it's that shared knowledge of oppressed peoples throughout the world that I think has been one of the benefits of social media, right? People being able to organize, but I also think that with that also comes some of the issues, right? People sit in, if anyone's not familiar, what are called filter bubbles. It's the way that algorithms work to basically filter out what you see on your social media profile is different than everyone, even your best friend, even your mom, your twin, if you're a twin, whoever. Everything you see is completely different. So I think that is something that's very unique. People can sit in these filtered worlds and not really understand what is going on in a larger context with everyone else. So you really do need to know your history and do your research and be aware. And with that also comes what I would say like a level of activism that is predicated on raising up the individual, sort of like the social media celebrity of the activist world, people selling sweatshirts and like t-shirts and stuff like that, and like to like bolster themselves and their like activist careers in a way in which is pretty troubling, to say the least. But I think those are some of the unique things, but without having an understanding of history and the way that movements and change has been made by people working together for common causes, and not the spotlighting or highlighting of one individual, two individuals, three individuals, or what have you. I think that is something very unique to this time that we're in.
You're absolutely right. And so kind of in line with our discussion around like the ways that we're seeing iterations and reiterations of things that we've seen before or that are like morphing into new forms now. Our next question is, recently we have seen very public demonstrations over the last year of what the difference between an ally and an accomplice, a comrade, or even radical kin can look like. What takeaways have you all drawn from the many non-Black folks who have suddenly or more concertedly started to show up for or alongside our community? And a follow-up to that would be, how do you respond to those still asking, so what do we do? How can we better show up? Cam, do you want to maybe take that since you addressed it in your last question?
Can you drop it in the chat? I'm a visual processor, not an auditory one. Thank you.
Nate, do you want to take that one then? While Cam is processing.
Yeah, sure. I think in terms of, I think someone had mentioned, I don't know who, I was listening to something the other day, but I think that, the question of, so what can we do? If that still is a question, then obviously that still hasn't been solved, because it should be something that is already kind of thought about, processed, embodied, I think what could be done is, and I think a lot of people, is just the time to process, and like what Cam was mentioning, knowing the historical roots, knowing, embodying, maybe you weren't directly a part of some of the oppression or oppressive ways that have impacted Black folks, but you now have a choice and an opportunity to directly impact those individuals. So yes, definitely, the protest, the requests for more people of color that look like us on campus that usually are not well represented, the recruiting of students, the support for programs on campus to really ensure those students can be successful. So I think it's a multi-layered process. Obviously, I don't think there's one direct route, but then again, maybe there is. It starts from the top, right? So those that model the behavior, you're modeling to the campus what is acceptable, modeling to the community what is acceptable. So I think there just needs to be a multi-layered approach. And I don't know if there's one starting point, but I think definitely, having discussions, putting money up, like Cam was mentioning, in different ways, whether it's through jobs or opportunities, supporting Black businesses, Black organizations that, definitely can assist others and making that transition. Those are all important ways to kind of show up and support the community on campus and off to ensure that we can be successful. Yeah.
Okay, I'm ready. Okay, I think one of the takeaways is, and I think there's a distinction between all of the titles listed in the question, but I won't get too much into that. I think those can mean very different things, but I would say take a back seat. Like folks have said on this call or on this line earlier, is like folks have been doing this for quite a long time. And there's lived experience as well as others with organizing experience and all of those things, that if it's what's going on is rather new to you, you wouldn't walk into your mechanic's shop and start telling them how to take apart your car and you just bought the car last week. You gotta know your role and know your position. But that doesn't mean you can't have a critical eye or ask questions, but you do it with reverence and respect for other folks who have more experience, who have been doing it. It's okay to disagree, or maybe not understand, but take the time to figure out why you disagree, do some inner searching, again, learn some history. But it's perfectly fine to maintain a critical eye, but it's sort of like talking to, in my family, we have respect for our elders. And so I'll just put it like this. It's like talking to your grandmother. Your grandmother might not know. I know my grandmother, when COVID, everything first started happening, she would try to send me Facebook posts of like fake news about coronavirus and be like, did you hear? If you drink a lemon and then blow your nose out your left nostril, you can beat coronavirus, and like all this like wild stuff, right? Because she doesn't have social media literacy. She doesn't understand Facebook, right? Like her and my grandfather got a Facebook to talk to their older friends. But when I approach her and I'm like, that's not real, I do it with respect, right? I do it with like a learning ear, trying to understand like why she thinks this is real, and we can have a conversation about why it's not, right? So it's that level of like respect and reverence when you're dealing with folks with more experience, more time in, that you should take that posture and not demand a front seat, want to be in the front, driving the boat. And then also create opportunities. If you have the opportunity, if you have the privilege, if you sit in a position where you can, create opportunities. And opportunities don't mean, creating opportunities looks like giving folks the reins, like giving them the spot, passing them the ball, giving them the reins, right? And they might fail. That's always a possibility, right? But if you're a good team player, if you're really about being on a team and being accomplished, being an ally, that also requires you to be a good teammate. And sometimes being a good teammate is passing someone the ball, even though they might miss the shot, but you just have to let them do what's necessary. and let them take the shot.
So to my non-Black folk or peers or colleagues who are interested in the work, so the greatest thing I can say is we got to start with being comfortable being uncomfortable. Right? The beauty of privilege is that things happen instantaneously. And I think when you come from a place of privilege and you want to start to get involved in something that has been going on for decades, centuries, it's easy to get burned out real quick because you're like, oh my gosh, we can solve this. Like if we just do these things, it's good, we're done. And it's the reminder that like, hey, I promise you folks have thought of this before, right? Like it's not brand new. But when you come from a place of privilege, and whether that privilege is racial privilege, it is leadership privilege, it is wherever you are in a position of power, authority, and privilege, you sometimes forget how challenging the process is to come to a conclusion. Because if in your role, it's always been an easy task, when you're placed in another role, it's almost mind-boggling. So like, how do we get to this place? And so that's the biggest takeaway I have for folks, right? Let's be comfortable being uncomfortable. Let's remember that like Rome wasn't built in a day. And if we're gonna be a part of progress, we need to, as Cam had mentioned, we need to A, understand our history, but B, we need to understand the intricacies of what has occurred, right? Like what has stalled things for so long? Why have we not seen the changes that we wanted to see? It's 2021, like why are we still dealing with certain things? Like you have to be true and honest and reflect with that, right? But then in addition to that, I wanna say, be willing to just listen, right? Like sometimes all we need, like I've been saying this for a while, is can you just sit in the funk with me? Like I don't need you to talk. I don't need you to say nothing. Just y'all hang out. Can we sit on the stoop together and just chill for a moment? Like that's what I need you to do with me right now. I don't need you to say, hey, let's fix this. Nah, like right now it's not fixing time. It's just we gonna sit. And sometimes in that sit-in process, right, things come to mind, right? You're like, oh, I hadn't considered this before. Because reflection brings about new ideas. Introspection brings about new lens and new perspectives. And so those are my recommendations to folks, but then also be willing to take the risks. Black folks take risks just by getting up out of the bed every morning. So if you're gonna stand by me, you gotta be willing to take the risk with me. Don't sit here and tell me you concerned about what somebody else is going to think if you say this. Then you're not here for me. We're not rocking together, right? Like I'm just not with you on that. But if you want to come down this journey, let's be vulnerable together. My vulnerability may look different from yours, but if you're vulnerable with me, we can make moves. Dropping the mic.
No, all of those are such amazing and super poignant points. And I think I'm honestly just going to be agreeing with all of that and I guess repeating it. But yeah, I've been so, I mentioned this before, once again, like overwhelmed by this wave of, I don't even know what it's called, like neo radicals. I don't know. But like that, once again, under this false sense that this is like some new thing, that they've struck the gold mine of activism or trying to enact change, when there have been organizations and people on the streets doing this day in, day out for years, for decades. And that's something I learned this past year, and it's only then that you, like what, wasn't like, I think it was like 10 months ago that I learned about like probably 5 local organizations in Oakland that for years have been doing programs for like the homeless, getting food to those that are in food deserts, just putting in the effort to, to do that thing. And they don't get nearly as much, coverage, or no one's asking them what they think about these things, but they're the ones that are lobbying against the police departments. They're the ones that are actually on the phones or taking up space in courts and recruiting people and doing all that work, putting their money into it, not getting paid for this work. And I think, me just being from the outside looking in, like, once again, I cannot claim to be any of this. I can only sit and appreciate and hopefully maybe one day play my part in one and hopefully contributing to that. But what I can do is sit here talking to all y'all and everyone that's participating, watching, that y'all got to do that research. And that goes beyond, reading the James Baldwins, the Frantz Fanons, the W.D. Du Bois. Who else? I'm missing some people, hella people. There's the list of Black critical thinkers is honestly, it's a rabbit hole. It goes deep. And I've only skimmed the surface, like probably in total read like 5 books, which is nothing. Like, and I would think that I'm at least like a little bit literate when it comes to these issues. But when in actuality, I'm not fluent. I might be in a 3rd grade passing level, but I'm not fluent, and once again, I think it goes back to just, we can always better ourselves, Black, white. It just comes down to how committed are you, to these issues. And I think someone brought it up, but it can be overwhelming and you can get jaded and it tires you out. This has been an ongoing fight for centuries. And to take a break, enjoy the moment, because this fight's gonna keep going. And so if you just want to bring yourself out and keep fighting like a chicken running around with his head cut off, it's not gonna help no one. It's not gonna help yourself. And then at the end of the day, you're just gonna end up hating the work you're doing, and it's gonna be less conducive to moving forward. And so I think it's about, like Cam saying, I think like everyone's saying, Ethne, Dr. Roberts, like, do your read, listen, talk, like have positive discourse. And in the day, like, be humble. Like, there's anything's a learning experience. And if someone criticizes you, first thing you should do is not assume that they're trying to criticize you or your being. They're trying to help you out, hopefully. There's gonna be rare circumstances where they're not. They're trying to be spiteful. But I'm gonna promise you 9 out of 10 times that person really wants to help you out. And it can hurt to hear something critical about you that, you've lived your life being that way for so long. That's part of you. And it takes like maturity, it takes a lot of character, but to self-reflect and just be like, well, okay, like, let me listen. Where are they coming from? Where is this coming from? Especially if it's, nothing new and it's been coming up a lot. I think that's where, with these protests, a lot of white folks see the blame coming on them. Like, what did I do? Like, I'm just doing whatever. And it's like, look, it's not about you. Like, I'm not talking about you. It's about what you embody, what you carry, how you exist is a certain way due to the history, due to the past, due to the way that the framework of our society has been laying out for us to all exist in. Every perpetual thing that has happened for a reason, because it was built that way. We act confused by it, but you reveal the current, right? And it's all right there. And someone had to make that system, and it takes a lot of work to dismantle that system. But in the day, you got to get at it. And so I think I'm gonna, like, this is my final little thought, but we can say, support Black business and buy Black, invest Black, all that, which is great. And I think people should do that, because I think that's the immediate solution, right? Or one of like a facet of the solutions, for sure. But I think at the end of the day, capitalism itself is not a system that is built for Black people. Capitalism is built on labor that others are doing to produce that capital. We are not. I'm not a capitalist. I don't got no capital. I'm gonna be a cog in a machine that's producing capital. And so we are so almost brainwashed to think that we are cradled by the system, when in the day we are the things creating this. We're the uplifting of the system. And so when we, as a collective people, and it takes time, it takes a lot of time, but once we get on the right page and can slowly but surely really see that, it's going to be a tidal wave of people just being like, wow, we can actually do something. So yeah.
So I want to add one more thing before we move on. So Dr. Beverly Tatum, author of Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria, makes a really great analogy that I think lends itself really well to this question. She talks about the fact that, we tend to treat racism as like, it's especially when you're not a person of color, right? It's like I didn't do that. Like, so it's not on me. But so the analogy she uses is the walkway at an airport, right? So not the escalator, but the move-in walkway. And so picture yourself on the walkway, and at the end of the walkway, wherever the walkway ends, is racism. That's what we're gonna say is at the end. And so we're all on the walkway, walking together, right? And if you don't walk on the walkway still moves you, right? It carries you to a destination. And if you walk, you get there faster. If you stand, you get there when the walkway ends. So if you are on the walkway, whether you intentionally got on or you were there by design, you have to walk in the opposite direction to then not participate. And if you've ever tried to walk down an opposing escalator or walk backwards on a walkway that's going the opposite way, you know just how challenging that is. But then let's throw in some people who are there for some hurdles, right? Because I don't want you walking backwards. What you doing, sis? Like, I'm trying to go north. Why are you going south? So now I'm gonna block you, right? And so now I need to be dodging and weaving. So now I'm a football player, right? I'm now going through trying to like block and weave to get to the opposite side. And that takes a lot of work. And that is what's required. If we're gonna be truthful about, I wanna do something about this, you gotta go in the opposite direction. And not only do you have to go in the opposite direction, but you have to go faster than the speed of the walkway. And you have to overcome the obstacles and the hurdles in the way.
I hope y'all are taking notes. So yes, so that brings us to our final moderated question. Just as a reminder, we'll be following up this portion with an audience Q&A. So if you have questions, go ahead and start sending them in the chat, or you can DM them to my co-moderator, Javon Edwards. And then we'll move on to that. So our last question for you all is, oftentimes, Blackness can feel like such an experience of pain, weariness, and rightful indignation given the oppressions and harm visited upon our community. What ways have we been finding joy in these times, and what are your hopes for the future? And even further, what are your hopes for Cal Poly in terms of naming progress, but also calling attention to how much work must still be done? Who would like to start?
We'll start. I think in terms of joy, that's been kind of an ongoing kind of expanding kind of territory for me. So it's been, sometimes it's just the small things. I was having a discussion with a friend, just going to the grocery store now is like an act of joy. Just being outside of the house and taking a walk. Just like the small things. I definitely during this period have reconnected with a lot of friends that I've kind of have lost, with the day and day kind of, stuff that goes on and, moving and transitioning that always goes on. This kind of opportunity to kind of like sit and have to be inside and be forced to connect with people in other ways has forced me to reconnect with a lot of those individuals. And, they've turned me on to different things and different ways to kind of experience life in the world. Most recently, it's been Clubhouse has been awesome. Just like, you just feel like you're completely, and listening in on a conversation, which is awesome. And you don't always have to speak up, but you can listen to these great conversations about these different topics. But yeah, and I think just in terms of like my position and what I do and who I work with, a lot of time I just get joy from talking to my students and my mentors and our student assistants. They are some of the most insightful, hilarious, real people that we get to interact with on a daily basis. And they bring me joy just seeing them be able to be so successful and move on. So yeah, just the small things.
So what has been bringing me joy is being intentional about taking time for myself, right? So I follow the nap ministry on the gram, and I'm all about taking naps, y'all. So I've never taken a nap like for real in my life, but let me tell you, 2020 has changed my life. So now I'm napping. And while I may not be physically napping, I'm intentional about taking time, right? So now I leave the Central Coast once a month to refill my Blackness so I can come back and pour out. I take time to rest. And I cook because I am a Caribbean woman and there's no Caribbean food here. So I cook what I want to eat. So if y'all trying to do a little cookout, let me know. I enjoy cooking and I enjoy like having people eat my food. But no, so for real, I take time to rest. I take time. I'm sorry, y'all, I'm reading the chat. I take time to rest. I take time to cook and just to like get filled back up with people who are valued in my life, but then also like reaching out to yes, Jamie, you can put in an order. I can send you something. And then being with my students, right? Especially students of color. As a faculty and a scientist and a scholar here, like I make sure that like I set space aside for students of color to work in my lab because I find that there's many opportunities for students on campus. Not many students of color take advantage of said opportunities, right? So I want to make sure that they have spaces where they know they can thrive. And so being with them is great for me because the experience, whether or not you're Black, if you're from a marginalized community, the experience is similar in some regards. And so connecting with my students brings me joy in ways that I don't get to do with my colleagues or just others. And so taking that time to rest, eat, cook, and connect is what I do.
I think I'm certainly on the same page as both of y'all. My days are typically jam-packed with the stuff I'm doing, should be doing, and taking those moments of just respite, pause, whatever it may be. Like sometimes it's just like taking a seat and like throwing on a record real quick and just like making some tea. Just like a quick like 30-minute moment before I get back to whatever it is I'm doing. And I think being able to savor those moments, it brings me so much joy. And like I can't even describe it because some people are always just need to be doing something or like have like a tangible thing. But pausing really does rejuvenate me. And I'm not talking like, oh, like I'm gonna take a little break, watch some Netflix, whatever. Like I'm talking no phone, no screens, nothing. Like I'm the only maybe hint of some media is like some music, and just, like watering the plants. Like, that's my answer. I love watering my plants. I'm a new like plant owner. I got some plants. I got a philodendron Birkin like a few months ago. That's a gorgeous plant and I love it. And just watering the plant and like I play music for the plant occasionally. My mom told me that's like the plant's like that. So it's just little things like that. It's like that take my mind away from the craziness of the world and like the craziness of living life and the stresses of, graduating in 4 months and people ask me what I'm gonna be doing with my life. Like, I don't know. I'm trying to learn physics. Let me water my plant. So it's with so much going on in the world, it's just finding those little moments. And I think all y'all can relate. So yeah, I think just finding that. And then my hopes for Cal Poly. I do want to add that I am hopeful, and I totally am agreement with Cam, his earlier statements of I would not recommend Cal Poly to my friends, to someone that asked me like what I think about Cal Poly. And that's such a problem, that's such an issue. Like I feel like I should have so much pride in the place I went to school, like to get a great education, because an architecture degree from Cal Poly is one of the best one can get like in the world. I should be like, yo, you should go there. It's the best time ever. And the fact that I can't, it hurts for real. But at the end of the day, I do have hope, because I would like to believe that if the faculty and administration reach those roadblocks, or there's, divides in what wants to be done, how far it should go, that the students, they've always shown a resilience and a commitment for change, and it's slow going, but that they have that will and desire, that is what I'm hoping for. And that I've seen it, and having now worked with staff and faculty, like I've worked on campus jobs over the past few years, and seeing how much they care and how much all y'all care. And it's just, you don't get nowhere when people care that much, so there's clearly a love in it. There's an obsession. So, I got hopes for sure for Cal Poly. And I'm gonna stay plugged in long past my time here. So let's keep it rocking.
I'm gonna go next. Ethany, you look like you're still writing, getting your thoughts up. Okay, I'm gonna go. I think there's there's three prongs to what I'm about to say. So one, how do I find joy in times like this? First, I want to give a shout out to Dr. Jose Navarro in the Ethnic Studies Department. At my time in Cal Poly, the Navarro family, as well as the entire Ethnic Studies faculty, was beyond words. That's my family. And one of the things that he told Lonnie and I one time, lots of times, was you got to have fun. There has to be joy in the struggle, right? And so you have to make sure that there's that. Like, what's the point of working this hard, whether it's in school or you're trying to change systems and you don't enjoy it? Like, no. So I think one, joy is super important. So whatever that is for you, find that. But I'm gonna have to third what Dr. Roberts and Zane said, naps. I love a good nap. All my friends call me old because I love naps. Boy, I'll take some naps. I'll give me a little Epsom salt bath, soak my feet. If you've been to the Black History Museum in DC, MLK got his foot soak bucket is in the museum. Check it out. I listen to podcasts. I love to learn. I'm forever a student, and I'm also an artist. So I make art with my friends, shoot the breeze with like my friends and colleagues, and try to pop back into stuff like this. Stay connected with the people that have really helped me to grow. In terms of my hopes for Cal Poly, let's see. I think there's three different things that I want to say about this. So Zane mentioned earlier capitalism, and sometimes I try to stay away from even bringing that word up because it makes people shut down their ears and they don't want to hear what has to be said. It makes them uncomfortable. In the same ways that talking about race makes them uncomfortable, but they haven't necessarily unpacked why those things make themselves uncomfortable. And so capitalism, just like the university, our system's not designed for us as BIPOC folks. And so whether you're in the university as a student or an alumni or faculty, we always have to understand what our relationship is to the university, and how we might develop what are known as maroon communities within the system in order to survive, whether that's capitalism at large or the university. If you're not familiar with maroon communities, Dr. Roberts could probably tell you all about that. In Jamaica and other areas of the Caribbean, maroon communities were communities where enslaved folks revolted and escaped the chains of slavery and oppression and went off into the mountains and have their own communities. It's where, Marcus Garvey and Usain Bolt and Bob Marley were groomed and bred. And these are communities that basically live on the outskirts, but within the system of slavery, right? Because they still live within the confines of the island of Jamaica. They're not home in West Africa. And so we have to ask ourselves as BIPOC people in the university, like, how do we create these communities that help us survive? Because we're not going to survive without creating the community. I think I've been trying to drive that home all day. It's like, and we also have to be gracious with each other, right? Not everybody knows everything. And we all can learn from each other. And it's just having that patience and taking that time. Yeah, because again, these systems weren't created for us. So that's my message to BIPOC students. I guess to more hopes for Cal Poly would be, Cal Poly administration, the ones that make the big calls. I wonder why Cal Poly year over year admits more poor white students to Cal Poly than poor Black and Latinx students combined, right? I don't know what the numbers are anymore, but they were dismal when I was there, less than 200 Black students. I can recall a conversation that I had with two faculty members, one in the history department, one in the sociology department, both white men, who said they were in a meeting with a provost advocating for admission of more Black students. I don't know if it's the same provost now, whoever the provost was in 2018, this is who it was. And she told them that there weren't more than 200 qualified Black students in California high schools to attend Cal Poly, right? So if that's the attitude of people of the provost, I mean, no wonder why the numbers are so bad. No wonder why we don't necessarily see as many Black folks or Latinx students or Indigenous students coming through Cal Poly. So my question to, my hope for Cal Poly administration is that they would get it together, whether that's cleaning house and getting new administration, or these folks are actively working and putting in the work to do things and not saying, oh, well, we've been working on this since 2015. Well, Cal Poly's had this problem for longer than 2015. So what's going on here? I think it's just kind of ridiculous. If you want to do something, I mean, figure it out. If y'all are so bright and the best, then come on now. You got PhDs and got money to burn. You could create scholarships. If you created partial scholarships for 3,000 Indigenous, Black, Latinx students from California high school systems, I mean, what are we even talking about here? It's so easy for you to do. Tap the Foster Farms family. They give money to Cal Poly every year. Raytheon, whoever. There's plenty of money to burn, and y'all know it. And then my other hope for Cal Poly would be that alumni who consider themselves allies or accomplices would continue to do the work as alumni of Cal Poly to try to create better spaces for the BIPOC students at Cal Poly, even though they're in alumni, whether that's giving money to BASE or the cross-cultural centers, tap in with the folks that are leaders in those areas, see if you can sponsor a student, buy students books, donate some scholarship money, donate to a food fund, figure something out. Y'all are supposed to be the best and the brightest. Get it together. I mean, this is ridiculous at this point. So yeah, my hope for Cal Poly is that I could actually be proud to say I went to Cal Poly, right? I don't own literally any Cal Poly attire. A shirt, a hat, nothing. You'll never see me do that. I just interviewed someone at my job the other week. I just had an interview with a woman who was interviewing for a position, and she was a Cal Poly alum, graduated before me, and I was hesitant. Like, she was saying all the right things, but I'm like, but can you really serve the Black and brown youth that my organization serves? So I'm hard pressed to believe that, because you went to Cal Poly. And I'm saying a lot because I went there. She was a white woman that went to Cal Poly as well. But I mean, yeah, I think as long as I have those doubts, and I don't think there's anything that would make me yeah, changed my mind about Cal Poly until some of those things are addressed. So if you're an alumni, or if you're on this call and you'll be an alumni and you're not of the BIPOC community and you graduate, figure out ways that you can give back when you do get that six-figure job because you went to Cal Poly and you majored in aeronautical engineering or what have you. Figure it out. I mean, the Black Alumni Chapter of Cal Poly does a lot of great stuff for the students at Cal Poly, but there's only so much they can do. It's a small number, right? When I was at Cal Poly, there was less than 100, less than 200 Black students, right? You know the alumni number is small. This was 2018. So yeah, that's all I have to say.
Well, all right. Javon, do you want to come on and introduce the next section? And while we wait for Javon, y'all just sit with what was said.
All right. Thank you, panelists, for your thoughtful and truly honest responses to the questions that were posed by Leilani, and for sharing your experiences and perspectives on the state of Blackness at Cal Poly and beyond. Now we're going to move into the audience Q&A portion of the event. So please feel free to type in any questions that you have for the panelists at this time, and we will provide the panelists with an opportunity to respond to some of the questions in the chat. We do have one question ready to go. The first question is coming from Dr. Jamie Patton. Dr. Patton, would you like to come on and ask your question?
Yes. Cam. Thank you.
Yeah.
I start with that because while we had some, and I actually went out to get my mic so I can drop it, moments, you truly just dropped the mic. I appreciate and I love this panel in that y'all have spoken the truth, your truth about Cal Poly. And I even look at some of the comments that were rendered. We can't be Cal Poly proud if we're not proud of Cal Poly. And that's something that I embraced in 2017 when I joined the Cal Poly Mustang family. We have a lot of work to do, and we go back to the concept of we have unfinished business. So I look to others in the panel to dig in, to tell us your truth. One of the things that I appreciate about this panel from day one, I want to say it was one of the first state ofs that we did here at Cal Poly, is that we were able to speak truth to power. We were able to speak to the experiences that we've had as Black individuals in this community. We've been able to speak to the assistance of a Black living, learning community. In the last couple of years, we've been able to talk about the different resources that we provide in the university over the last couple of years. But I'm really hopeful, and we might go overtime, and that's okay. Nobody's going to shut out the lights. We're not at church, and we don't have deacons here in Zoom. But we might go overtime. But I'm hopeful that you all can truly share. I look to Ethne, I look to Zane, I look to even Leilani, one of our moderators who've been here, been able to speak to the struggle of being a Black individual. I look to the others on the screen that can speak to being a Black individual, to truly speak to your experience and how we can continue this process of moving forward. Cam, I feel you, bruh. And hearing that you're not Cal Poly proud, that breaks my heart, because this is a fine institution. And I know that we have some changes to make, and I'm hoping that we're making them year over year. But unfortunately, that's not your experience. And I value that. I value hearing your experience tonight. But I inquire and I put out there to those who are here, those who have been here for generations, to speak to what are our next steps from your vantage point. here at Cal Poly to make this a place where Black students, faculty, and staff feel valued, respected, and where they belong, from your perspective?
I mean, I think it's just going to be like what, once again, I think Cam said some great things, but just if the school really is serious about any of this, then there's no reason it can't happen. Like what Cam said, the school's got a lot of money, a lot of donors. I think and once again, the donors can only donate right to where they want to donate. But I feel like the school certainly, and I don't want to make assumptions. I do not know the logistics of the bureaucracies of Cal Poly or any state university, but that I don't know how money gets funneled, what channels it goes through, but I'm pretty sure that not every single amount of donor money is going to where that donor wants it to go. And so I don't see any reason why, like Cam said, there can't be special scholarships. There can't be incentives for students to come to the school. Because at the end of the day, the only reason I came to school, because I didn't know the demographics. I didn't even do that research. I got into 3 schools, this being one of them. This was the only feasible economic option. Honestly, the only reason I came here was because it was the cheapest option. Like I knew they had a good architecture program, and it was the cheapest thing I could do, while still being incredibly expensive. And like I'm going into debt. Like that's a fact. And that many people that I've talked to, people of color that got into Cal Poly, they couldn't afford it, and they just said, "Oh, I'm just gonna go to community college," which I think is a better option for them. I advise most people to go to community college. You're gonna save money in the long end, get probably the same exact education, and just be better off in the long term. And so, if Cal Poly is really serious about these things, like when I first got admitted in 2016, the student population of Black student population was 0.8%. That might be at 1%, maybe now. I'm not sure, but like it's been 5 years, and there's been a possible 0.1% increase. Like why? I don't know. That's kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel of progress in my eyes, and it comes down to just like give people a reason to come here, because clearly what these protests have shown is that the city itself is not a welcoming climate to Black folks or Black identifying folks. And the school, with all of its negative headlines and bad press that's gone in racial issues, there's no reason logically for any self-appreciating Black person to want to come here in the sense that they're going to feel welcomed, you know? And so I'm not even surprised when I see the numbers of people that look like any of us, you know, on campus. And I guess like the closing kind of thought is that, you know, one of I think like the simplest of requests, and maybe I'm just naive and thinking it's a simple request, I don't know, but this has been a request since I first came here as a freshman in 2016, that the base get more space as a physical entity, because it reached a point where it was very clear like that's not enough space for the amount of people that wanted to use it. And I think a lot of people thought that was like maybe not like a huge deal. Like there's got to be another room that people could move this, and the fact that's never happened in this 5 years, like I think that's just telling that why would we think that the admissions would be any different? Like the school probably knows that these students are going to require money to go toward them rather than them having the money just to front and give to the school. And there's going to be an investment, and the school probably doesn't want to make that investment. And so I could be wrong on all this. I'm not going to act like I know everything, but that's just me looking outside in and being honest. And you know, it's frustrating, but it is the situation we're in. You know.
Thank you, Zane. Thank you.
I would also build off of what Zane mentioned. I think, well, part of the reason I chose Cal Poly was it was only one of 2 institutions that had my major, and it was convenient. But in terms of actually, you know, I've worked at a couple different R1s that hadn't had as many racial issues. And so it's definitely been an interesting kind of experience coming back as staff. I think part of the problem is reflection of staff and faculty that reflect the students in the student body, the Black students that we want to be admitted. You have to have people here that obviously that reflect them, that can support them. I know for sure, for instance, UC Santa Barbara, where I used to work, they have Black psychologists on their staff. How come they can't have Black psychologists here on staff, knowing that the experience of Black students are, even within the confines, Santa Barbara has very similar demographics, and it might be actually a little bit worse in terms of the rich and the poor dynamic differences, but they have two Black faculty, they have two Black psychologists on staff that work with just Black individuals on campus with any issues or concerns that might come up. They've instituted, multiple Black centers. Obviously, they have a Black Studies department, right? So that's been there since the 70s. And then they've instituted Black centers. They've instituted an African diaspora center. So they have multiple layers of support for the students that they end up taking onto campus. Obviously, I think there as well, the percentage is probably 1%, but they are trying to build in supports for those students that they do admit to actually be retained. And of course, I think that's just part of, what could be done to support students and ensuring that they're going to be supported while they're here on the campus. I think a second layer is retention programs on campus. I mean, where some programs are unequally supported and are not always supported in the ways that could benefit and ensure that students have opportunities to really connect and provide those academic, social, emotional supports that they need to be successful. I think, that's just another layer that kind of possibly needs to be explored, along with, just having some base level, this goes back to Cam again, sorry, those historical courses that all students should be required to take. Yes. There should be some base level knowledge that students can't say, I didn't know that was inappropriate, or that was something that shouldn't be talked about or shouldn't be represented in that way. There should be some base level knowledge. I mean, after all, these are the brightest students in the state of California and outside of California. So they should have some common sense coming in.
Absolutely. Man, thank you, Ethne, so much. And I forgot that we share the experience of working at UCSB together. But I remember even in my time there, the Greek life, we had some NPHC organizations, and we've had them here at Cal Poly. But how do we foster those alumni relationships, and how do we offer those opportunities even for our current students to connect? Because when you think about NPHC, and that's the National Panhellenic Council, majority Black fraternities and sororities, that provided an outlet, a social outlet that created a sense of community and belonging to our students that was alive and well, I want to say from the 70s to about the 90s, if not early 2000s here at Cal Poly. So there's so many different layers to it. But thank you, Ethne, for those thoughts and how we can continue to layer, looking at counseling positions, looking at that work specifically with populations, and again, the centers that we provide. So dope, thank you. And if anybody's interested in being a member of Kappa Psi Fraternity Incorporated, just let me know. We can, we're gonna make that happen so we can get that the first one to be back on campus. We are the finest. Sorry.
Thank you.
I think some others might disagree.
Thank you, panelists, for answering Dr. Patton's question. We do have one question that came via private message. So the question is, some of you have already shared, but I would like to hear how everyone would speak to a group of prospective students who are considering Cal Poly. In sharing your experience, what advice would you give to BIPOC, but specifically Black, students who are considering Cal Poly for their college experience?
So while I'm not in the role of a student, but what I can say is a lot of what students experience here at Cal Poly, from what I've observed and heard, are similar to other experiences Black students experience at other predominantly white institutions. This is sort of a trend that we see across the US, and having taught at other PWIs, students at Cal Poly are not alone. Right. So when we are providing these guidance or recommendations, then I think part of that is being upfront with the fact that like you're applying to a predominantly white institution. And what does that mean? Right. Because I think, at least for many of the students I spoke to, many of them were surprised when they got here at the lack of diversity. And so I think that's something that we need to be having those conversations up front, even for our white students who came from very diverse backgrounds. Like, they showed up and they were shocked to see the lack of diversity here. So I think that's something that we really need to emphasize, like, know what you're getting into. If this is where you want to be, and then also recognize that that means that you may have to be a little bit more intentional about cultivating and creating communities and spaces to feel heard, loved, and appreciated, because it's not going to just be there for you, especially if you're coming from spaces where that has been the norm, right? The way higher ed works is that usually when things occur for marginalized students or students of color, we tend to rely on faculty and staff of color to create spaces for those students. It's not something we do sort of like institution-wide. And so if you don't have many of those people represented in your workforce, then it's hard for those programs to sort of be there. In addition to that, like, there was a lot of spoken about like the challenges students have, but I want y'all to also remember that staff and faculty also share the same pains, right? Especially if you're not from this area, like coming to the Central Coast or San Luis Obispo is a shock to many Black faculty and Black staff. And so retention is also a challenge. So we talk about making improvements for students. Well, we have to be able to retain Black faculty and Black staff in order to make those changes, right? And if I can go somewhere else and not have to deal with the headache, then why would I stay, right? And so while students may choose to stay, they have fewer people who look like them who are staying. And so that's a part of the conversation that needs to occur. But I think we need to be very upfront with potential students about what the experiences may be, the good, the bad, and the ugly, so that they are clear on the decisions they're making.
I saw something in the chat and that actually made me laugh. So I'm going to talk about that. Someone said that there's so many images of diversity on Cal Poly's website and in advertising. And yeah, I literally told another Cal Poly alum, like, oh, let's look at the Cal Poly website. And I was like, wow, I didn't do the count, but I was like, I bet you if we counted, there's an overrepresentation of folks of color that are visibly of color on Cal Poly's website. And that's not accurate. But to prospective students, I would say take as many classes as you can at a community college if you can, if they count. I went to Cal Poly for free. I had grants. So, but one of the things that you quickly learn at Cal Poly, I don't think Cal Poly is coming off the quarter system anytime soon, but it's like, if you don't get those classes, then you're put behind already. That's added weight onto the fact of all the other things that come with Cal Poly. Second thing is like find community. And to that, I would say I was at the ethnic studies department 50-year anniversary last year, and I'm not sure if they're the dean anymore, but the dean of the time of CLA mentioned a report that was independently done that said that ethnic studies students at Cal Poly thrive at Cal Poly despite the circumstances of the university. So I would say pick up an ethnic studies double major, walk all over to that department. There'll be people in there that look like you and that also are committed to your success and have a community. And outside folks have verified that now. That's on record. That's not just me saying that because I'm trying to boost up my department, my old department, but that was said by the dean of the CLA. I would also say like be an RA, something like that. Guarantee yourself housing because you're going to face possible housing discrimination. I mean, there's not a lot of, again, with SLO not having a lot of folks of color in the community, if you show up on the front door of a rental property, you might face a little static by the way you look. And then the other thing that I would say is, yes, it is a PWI, and a lot of PWIs do have problems with racial incidents, but I think Cal Poly is unique in the sense that it is located in California, one of the most diverse states in the US, right? I think California is like 65% Latino. I don't know, I don't do the census, but predominantly folks of color within the state, and it's a public school within the state, and the numbers for students of color are abysmal. So I think that speaks to the attitude of the folks who call the shots, not the Dr. Pattons, not the folks who are on these lines today, but yeah, I think that speaks volumes to the policies that have been in place at Cal Poly for some years now. Oh, and if, never mind, this was the last question, but if somebody wants to figure out, pull together some alumni, like, you know, buy a house, rent it out to Black and brown students, that would help.
So yeah, to add on to my pieces of advice to incoming students, prospective students, to Cal Poly. I mean, if you really want to go Cal Poly, definitely what Cam says, you know, go to community college first. You know, you'll save money and have less headaches for sure. But as a more general or more nuanced suggestions, definitely come visit San Luis Obispo first. I didn't come here until I got in. Like I'd heard stories, you know, but it's not until you witness it firsthand that you really can compartmentalize. And yeah, that was like damn, all right, 5 years of this, all right, I'm in it. So you know, understand that and feel how you feel about that. Like you got to come to grips with that if that's something you're willing to do, because there's not a single person of color I've talked to that's been in attendance, has attended Cal Poly, that said it's been easy or they've not noticed being Black at Cal Poly. That's just not true. You're it's going to be something that you deal with. But like Dr. Roberts said, you know, it's not a Cal Poly only issue. You go to any PWI, it's you're going to notice. It's going to be a thing. But like Cam said, it's very unique to Cal Poly in the sense that I think other college towns, you know, barring a few others that are very much like white, you're going to find pockets of diversity. You're going to have pockets of the city itself that, you know, have people of color in the fabric of the city. There's really no zones like that in SLO. It is what it is, you know, and that comes down to, I think, not large populations of Black folks not settling down here and making those communities. You know, there's pockets of people, but you know, we're like the Black businesses in SLO. We're like where's the Black Caribbean spot I can go to that me and all the homies go to after class. That becomes like the hangout spot, which then starts, you know, that all it's not there, you know, and you feel that, and it's it's an issue. And so it stems from the city itself, it stems from the school. And I think like that really is my advice. Like you have to understand why you're doing it. Like, is the degree from Cal Poly worth that extra mental, physical energy you got to put in to get through it? And there are resources here, and there's people, you're gonna find people here. There's amazing people here that, you know, the connections I've made, the friends I've made here, like I would not trade that for anything. But whether they're people of color, whether they're not, and like I've met some amazing Black folks here. Like, oh my goodness, like I'm so glad I came to Cal Poly to meet these individuals and like to now call them acquaintances, friends, best friends, whatever it may be. And that if I didn't come to Cal Poly, I would never have met them. But I had my reasons for coming here, you know. And like I said at the beginning, like I got this obsession with it, you know. I got a love for it. That's worth all that hardship and all that struggle. And, you know, I wouldn't recommend that to anybody. But I guess I say, you know yourself better than anyone else. And you know why you're doing what you're doing. So come here, scope it out, get a land out of the scene, and then you'll know if you can see yourself fitting in here. Because I think everyone does have their space wherever it may be, but at the end of the day, it's up to you to decide, you know, take that leap and make that next step. So just come in informed, you know, don't do what I did. And yeah, just get the knowledge.
All right. Well, if nobody else has any other closing thoughts or anything, that concludes State of Blackness. We'd like to give a special thank you and a virtual round of applause to our incredible panelists. We'd also like to thank Student Diversity and Belonging, the Student Diversity and Belonging Collective, for continuing to hold spaces and events like these that provide the opportunity for marginalized groups to share our experiences, voice our concerns, and advocate for our communities in an effort to engage in conversations about social justice and to stimulate real and progressive systemic change locally and nationally. Thank you to our attendees for listening and engaging with us during the State of Blackness. We hope that you all were able to take away a few key concepts about the State of Blackness this evening, and we hope that everyone continues to engage in continuous intra and interpersonal learning that fosters our education about the African diaspora and the ways we can continue to build up, strengthen, and support the Black community. You can find out more information about the Black Academic Excellence Center and our programming resources and other items via base.calpoly.edu or via our link tree, which I'll send in the chat. And yeah, thank you again and have a great evening.